So the first thing you want to do when you're going to start the neon effect is, of course, have an image to work with. So you get your image open in Photoshop, and then what you want to do is you want to make sure that it looks good, right? If you got to crop it or anything, hit the crop tool and do whatever you think. I kind of like those lenses, those laces, so I think I'll leave them. So then you want to just check it out. Maybe if you want to zoom, right, you can use the zoom tool here, and you can use it to zoom in, or of course, you can turn it negative and zoom out. But just get the image up so that you can see most of it, and you can decide like where you want to place your neon effect um, object, right? And so then you're going to go ahead and you're going to use the pen tool. And so the pen tool is usually right below your text tool. It's right there. If I right click on it, you can see I've got all these other kinds of pens I can use. But make sure you got just the regular old pen tool selected. And once you have the pen tool selected, you're going to go up top to the top menu. Underneath the file and edit, there's the menu for your pen. Shows me that I have my pen tool selected, and then very next to it, there are all the things I can select for the pen. There's shape, path, there's pixels too. For our work, we're going to create shape, okay? And then the next thing you want to look at is right next to it. There's fill. And if I click on that little box next to the fill, there's all of these things I can do. I can have my fill be a certain color if I want, right? But for our work, we want to make sure that we're choosing the white rectangle with the red line. And what that means is that you're choosing no fill at all. So you're not giving your pen any color. Then next to that, you can see that there is stroke. And if I click on stroke, again, I have that same option. I can have my stroke be different colors, right? And for our work, it's easier if we make sure that that is white. The next to stroke is the size that that stroke can be. You can see I can take it all the way up to 288 pixels. But for our work, keep it a really, really low, like below 1, like this is 0.81. Okay, so don't go over 1. It might end up being too thick for you. So what stroke means is how thick that pen's going to look when we draw it. So I'll show you an example here. If I click here and click here, that's the stroke at that 0.81. If I go and I crank it up to 17, see how much thicker it is? And then again, right, I can make it thicker and thicker and thicker. And so if you draw and you want to make that line a little thinner, or you want to make that line a little thicker, you can do that, right? I usually start off pretty thin, and then I adjust it, but you can decide what you want. So maybe I'll stop here around 5, just for example's sake, okay? Um, and then I can go ahead and I still have my pen tool. It's still showing me. So if I click again down here, it adds to it. And then if I complete my shape, right, I've got a triangle of sorts. If you don't like it, right, just go to Control Z and you can go all the way back and redraw whatever you want. Okay. Okay. Um, Once you have this drawn, you'll see that down on the bottom right corner where your layers panel is, you now have a layer. It's called Shape 1. Because you chose shape with your pen and you wrote with your pen, you created a new layer that's called shape. Okay. And this is the shape that you can then create the neon effect to. Before I do that, I might want to move this shape. I might want to resize it. So I make sure that I have that layer selected by making sure that it's gray. And then I can go Control T, or if I want to use my menus, I can go to Edit Free Transform Path, which says Control T. Either way, it's going to select that layer, right? Which then will allow me to move it. And if I want, I can reshape it. So what I'm doing is I'm just kind of making it a little bit bigger, and maybe I'm going to tilt it a little and just kind of play with the shape to make sure I like the way it looks. And then once I've got it, I can just hit done here, or I can just click anywhere else. Okay. So now I have my shape. It looks like the triangle that I want to use. And so now I want to apply a neon effect to this shape to make it look like it's a glowing neon light. So I make sure that I have my shape layer selected. By clicking on it, it turns gray. And then I'm going to apply an effect to it. So I go down to the FX. Okay, so right underneath our layers panel, there's an FX little icon or little um, wording. And when I hover over it, it says add a layer style. And that's what we're going to do. We're playing with styles with this assignment. So I click on that FX and it gives me these things, okay, blending options and all of these other things. And so the first thing you want to do is you want to think about creating a glow, a colored glow to make that triangle look like it's neon. And so I'm thinking of glow, and my glow options are inner glow and outer glow. And you're going to start with outer glow. Okay, so always start with outer and then finish with inner. So I go to my outer glow and I click on it. And when I do, this dialog box appears. Your dialog box might have different colors here. So then this is where you can look at a couple of things that are super important for you. The first thing is you want to look at your blending mode. And if I click on it, there's a pull down for all of these different ways that I can blend my outer glow effect. For us, we're just going to choose normal. The other thing underneath it is the opacity, which means how strong will this effect be on my shape. The other thing underneath that is noise, which means how much fuzz do I want it to have. And then underneath that, there's a little color square. If I click on this color square, it allows me to change that color to any color I want. So if I want my neon to be red, I can choose red. If I want it to be blue, I can choose blue. If I want it to be yellow, I can choose yellow. Okay? So for my example, I might just choose purple. Okay, and so then once I have that purple chosen, I don't need to worry about any of these other things. But I might take my noise and take it down a little bit. After I confirm my color, I'm gonna take my noise and take it down a little bit. So while I'm doing this, look at this little square here that has that purple outline. And as I move that noise over, see how it's getting more and more broken on the edges? So that's telling me what my effect will look like. Also, I could pull this box over and I can see it on my shape. And so watch, I'll pull that noise back over to the left. There's no noise, and then I can add a little bit, little bit, little bit if I want. Neon kind of glows a little, so maybe I want a little bit of noise. You decide how much you want it to glow or have noise. Okay, so those are the only things you need to worry about for your outer glow is your blend option, your opacity, your noise, and your color. Okay. And one other thing I want to show you, if I take this opacity and I lower it, see how that color is just disappearing. So for this effect, crank it all the way up to 100. Okay. So I'm all set. I hit OK. So now the next thing I might notice is when I'm working on it, it looks bluey, right? It doesn't look purpley, but that's only because I'm working on my shape layer. If I click on my regular image layer, my layer 0 here, see, now I can see that purple glow. So it's just when I'm working on it, if I click back on the shape, it's going to give it a blue thing to let me know I'm working on that shape. So don't worry about it if you see that blue line, okay? The next thing I want to do is I want to work on another glow. But right now I've already done my outer glow. I can see it underneath my effects in my layers panel. So I'm going to go back down to FX to get a new effect. And I'm going to go ahead and choose inner glow. We do outer first, inner second. Okay. And there it is. It looks just like my outer glow option box. I'll pull it over a little so you can see the shape too. And with the outer glow, we are going to pretty much worry about the same things. So we have our blending mode. And for this, I would like you to try either multiply or screen. Multiply is here and see how it made that shape dark, right? It made that purple kind of dark. And then screen is a little bit lower and it made it a little less. Now, I prefer screen because it kind of has a little white in the middle and it looks like a glowing neon tube. But some people like multiply because they like it to be all one color. So you can choose either one, but for my personal choice, I'm going to choose screen just because I think it looks more authentic or more like a neon bulb would look. So then I have opacity and then I have noise again. So for your inner glow, because we're working with inner glow, you could take your opacity down a little bit. And I would recommend taking it down to about 30 or 20. So maybe I'm going to hover around 20. And then I would also make sure that my noise is 0. If I crank up my noise on the inner glow, it's going to diffuse this. If I zoom in, it'll look really kind of strange. So I'm just going to kind of tell you that you want to keep your noise at 0 and you want to keep your opacity pretty low. Okay. And then keep the color for the same color that you chose for your outer glow. And I chose this purple, so I'm going to keep that. Okay. So inner glow, screen blend, opacity between 20 and 30, noise 0, same color. I'm all set. Okay. And so now I kind of have this neon triangle around my Doc Martens. And again, it's got that blue tinge only because I'm working on the shape layer. If I click on the image layer, right, it goes away and I can see it. So let me grab my zoom tool. I'm going to just zoom in a little bit so it's a little bit clearer for me to see. And if I zoom in some more to show you, see there's a little bit of noise around it. I'm zoomed a little too far in, but you can see maybe if I wanted to change that noise, if I think this noise is too noisy, I can go and say, oh, I remember I added that on my outer glow. I can go and double click on my outer glow and I can take that noise down if I want. Okay, so you can kind of decide how you want to do that. So that you can always go back and edit those effects. That's why they show them underneath that layer. Okay, all right. So I've got it. It looks good to me. So now I want to add the effect where it looks like this triangle is kind of surrounding my Doc Marten, or my Doc Marten's kind of going in between it. So it has more depth. It's not so flat. Because we're always thinking about depth in photography. So in order to do that, I'm going to make sure that I have my shape layer selected, and I want to create a mask on that layer. We've done this a couple of times with other layers, but we would just want to make sure that when we're applying a mask to a layer, that we have the layer selected. So I've got my shape selected. I go on down to my mask button, which is a little rectangle that looks like a white rectangle with a black hole punched into it. And I can just click on that and it creates this white rectangle that's a mask over my shape image. That means I can manipulate this shape image in a couple of ways. So let's do it the way that we want to. So it is a white mask. And if I use black, I can poke a hole in this mask. So let's see what I'm talking about. If I go over and I get my brush tool, right, make sure you have the regular brush tool. And I go down to the coloration. I click on my foreground color and I make sure that my color is black. Means that I have a black brush. Then the last thing I want to check is I want to go up. The menu bar is showing me I've got a brush selected. I go next to it. This is how big my brush is going to be. So I can make it bigger or smaller. But most importantly, sometimes your Photoshop is going to default to have the hardness of your brush like 0. But we want to use this to poke a hole in a mask. So we want it at 100. Okay. And so I've got my brush. It's at 100. I kind of got a size I think might work. The last thing I want to check is make sure that my mode is normal. I'm not doing anything funky with this brush. It's just going to be normal. I want to make sure that the opacity is 100%, meaning again, it's as strong as it can be. So what I've done is I've made a really super hard brush and I made sure that the opacity on that brush is 100. I make sure that my flow is 100. So everything is nice and strong. Don't worry about your smoothing for this part. So now I want to look at this. I might zoom in a teeny bit and look at where I might want my Doc Marten to kind of pop out over the triangle. So go back to my brush. And so then I can just brush over the triangle where I want it to kind of pop out, right? So if I want this to look like my Doc Marten's floating over the triangle, I can just kind of take some of it away like that and like this, right? And ta-da! Now it looks like that triangle is like behind the Doc Marten, right? The Doc Marten's floating over it. Another effect I can do is not take away as much. So if you're using your black brush to take away some of the triangle, the opposite of black is white. So I can change this foreground color to white, and then maybe I can just add this top part back, okay? So white's gonna add it back, black's gonna take it away. So this is great if you need to do a little touch up or fix something. Okay? Very much like we did when we did with selective mask, selective color. So I might look at that and think, oh yeah, I kind of like that. Looks like the Doc Martin is kind of stuck in between that triangle. So maybe that's the vibe I'm going for. And go back to my zoom tool and hit fit screen and see if I like it. Okay. And so that's how you would apply a singular shape to a photo of anything, right? You can do this for anything. So you're going to have two classwork assignments. One's going to be applying a single one, and one's going to be applying duplicate or multiple neon effects. And I will show you that one in a different video.